Welcome back to another insightful episode of the Lifeboat, where I have an extraordinary guest and a very dear friend of mine, Smriti Chandra, the investment director at Abler Nordic, India, taking the mic to be your lifeboat. Smriti, in this episode, brings the investor vibe, जिसने entrepreneurship के highs and lows भी taste किए हैं. An investor who's a complete rock star and someone who believes in hard work is the key to success. And when it comes to talking straight and sensible, there's no one like Smriti. He's always right off the bat. हमारे इस एपिसोड में स्मृति और मैंने कुछ ऐसे टॉपिक्स टच किए हैं जो आपको एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप को देखने का एक नया नजरिया देगा एंड न्यू चैलेंजेस एंड स्ट्रगल्स को फेस करने का कॉन्फिडेंस भी देगा. We discuss the power and the importance of luck in entrepreneurship, our own entrepreneurship journey with the First League Ventures, to how as an investor with the mindset of an entrepreneur changes the way she looks at the founder while investing. स्मृति ने ये भी शेयर किया कि कैसे उनका स्ट्रॉन्ग लिंक्डइन प्रोफाइल उनको एबलर नॉर्डिक जैसे मल्टीनेशनल कंपनी में काम करने का अपॉर्चुनिटी मिला. Sit back and enjoy the episode. Learn from it, use the information and keep building one step at a time. Watch, like, share and subscribe to the channel and comment and let us know what you thought of this episode and what helped you. Welcome to the Lifeboat. Let's dive in. Smriti, welcome to the Lifeboat. Thank you for taking out time and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ibi, for having me over.
Thank
it's
you.
It's an absolute pleasure.
And in fact, let me tell you, you're so special. So I concluded in two parts, right? Either you're so special or I am so useless because you're the only person for whom in this entire season, the episode has been shot in my Gurgaon office, because for everyone else, it's either at their place or in their office. So the conclusion is either you're so special or I was so useless that you didn't want to invite me over to your fancy house.
Well, let's take the first one, that I'm so special and I'm honored for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here and thank you for making this happen. So I want to touch right at the beginning of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So the Smriti that I know for almost now a decade is a super confident, super aggressive. A lot of people come back and tell me, including a lot of my team members, super intimidating.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Though I have a different take because of course you're also a very dear friend of mine. But someone who goes toe to toe, head to head with every counterpart, gender agnostic, who serves on few of the most well-known companies' boards, reflects fantastic investor ideologies, more so as a sovereign fund because mindset of that is very, very different.
Absolutely.
But that is the Smriti of today. Was that Smriti always this confident diva? Or was it that a lot of things in life shaped how you are? So I want you to dwell back right from the beginning. Tell us a bit about school. Tell us a bit about growing up.
Right.
I know some parts about it, but I want to hear from you. How was it growing up in Bangalore? How was it growing up in a middle class background, service class oriented background?
Sure.
Things are very different, right? You shape it up. Take us a bit through that. How was life then? What was life like?
Well, as you said, yeah, service class, there was no almighty that would take us through life. That was clear from day one. The best part about childhood for me and where I stand today and I've learned through it is that we move places every 3 years. My dad was in a bank and I was born in a small village called Parigi in Andhra Pradesh, which I guess nobody knows. From there, I've been in villages and towns throughout my entire childhood until we got to Bangalore when I did my college. So every year, every third year, we're moving schools, every third year, we're moving places, making new friends, learning new cultures. I think that kind of really built me as a personality where you learn to appreciate different views. You're not stuck up in the way you think and you're brought up and your ideologies, and you learn to listen, most importantly. And I think that helps a lot as an individual when you step into your professional world, to kind of just sit there and listen to people before reacting. And today we don't see that much. But childhood was that. And yes, for us always, academics was in the forefront. Rest everything can happen. Well, you're good at that, you're good at this. That's fine, but where do you stand in your class, in your studies? So dad and mom always pushed us, and for us there was no rank 2, it was always rank 1. right? So that way, academically, we were always hammered into that direction that you got to be good at it, you got to study on your own, there's nobody who's paying your fees going forward. So that was always there. And I think our parents kept us in that path, till I got to do my CA and my brother went to his engineering. But along the side, I think what I personally was enjoying doing is extracurriculars. I was always away from sports. Sports is something which I never liked. So I would run from my PE class. No. But yeah, dancing, debates, elocution, speeches, jam sessions, singing, anything else, we would be there at the front. We would participate for school, within school, with other schools. So we're always there. I think a lot of confidence that you talked about kind of stems from that as well. Just facing the audience, just being out there. Started very early for me in life. I've been on stage dancing since the time I remember, like maybe 5 years old or 6 years old or 3 years old. I've always been on the stage. So that is, I think, as a persona, the confidence starts there. In the work life, it comes much later, as you get your experience and start dealing with different kinds of people. But the seed of it was kind of sown long back.
So I want to pause you there for one thought, and I resonate a lot in one context that you stated about that ranking bit. So I'll tell you the little twist, right? At my end, I came again from a lower mid to middle class background, and I was born in Calcutta. And the eastern side of mindset is a lot in terms of concentrating on academics, concentrating on, the regular form of books and padhai and, so art and literature. It very resonates with the South, right? Yeah. So very similar. That's why one of the things I remember very clearly when I was growing up, and one of the not so fond but very relevant memory that I have is, ever since I had cognitive sense, I remember my parents constantly drilling this into me to say that you have to grow up to be a human being, which in context means a successful individual. You have to ensure you take care of us. You have to ensure that you do your duties and responsibilities towards us. So one part is that it comes naturally. The second part is it all gets drilled
into you.
I think that drilling in is a middle class mentality, because that middle class mentality is, and especially at least because your and my background is very similar, I call it a very interestingly cusp zone. Why is it cusp zone? Because you're in that ever aspirational zone. You're neither so poor that you're hopeless.
Yeah.
You're definitely not rich.
Yeah.
So you're always aspiring, and you're in that ever aspirational zone, right? So that two-wheeler aspiring to the four-wheeler zone, that what if factor. Okay, I wish I could go across and get that. I wish I could go across and build that. Or maybe that little extra pocket money that I could get. So today, when you look back, and as a mother, do you see a huge change in the mindset of individuals growing to say that it's not about that rank anymore? It's not about coming first in everything. It's not about saying that you have to go across and get a job. You have to do well in life. But a lot of people are saying that you have to do what makes you happy. I look at it to say that it's directly proportionate to the circumstance and the background that you belong to. So for me, for my child, I have that ability to say, because I know that my child perhaps is at least 100 times more privileged than where I was.
Absolutely.
So is it that today, if you look back and compare these two aspects, would you say that ranking still matters? Or is it that ranking will again matter depending on the background that you come from? What is the mindset, and how does it shape you as an individual when you look forward? If you marry the past and what you are today, and you marry those ideologies, what is the thought process there?
Well, it's tough because as you said, right, our children are growing up in a very, very different world than where we grew up. I mean, for us, everything was, if you achieve this, you get this. There was always a
binary.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you come first, you get a cycle. You come second, you probably get nothing, or third, nothing. Second would be like something. But if you come first is what you get.
Yeah, you're lucky. My parents was like, it was hopeless. They started by saying, first you pass, you'll get something.
No,
after that, maybe you'll go
thankfully there. But right from my first pen, right? Pencil I don't remember, but at least the first pen I remember, to a watch, to a cycle or to something has always
What was
come.
the pen, the pilot?
The nip pens we used to have.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
Pilot
not the
or
pilot,
Sheffer?
I don't remember.
Fountain pen.
Not the fountain pens. So from there, it's always like, okay, in this test, if you come first, you get this, right? So we've always earned it. So we know the value of even the smallest thing that we've earned. But today's children, obviously, it's not the case. I mean, we as parents have failed to that extent. We don't get our children. But having said that, am I at a zone where I say that to my son that you do what makes you most happy and this forget? I don't think so. I'm that parent yet.
Because that's the middle class background.
Absolutely. Because I mean, we can take him through to a certain level, but beyond that, it's his life and he has to figure out what he wants to do and he needs to build something for himself, for which you can't absolutely lax and say you do what you want. And at a 10-year-old, you can't expect them to decide, how their future will like really take shape. So you have to provide all the, at least I believe that you expose them to whatever you can and he will choose, but you have to push them. And you have to, may not be pushed as hard as we were pushed, but you still have to be at it.
So let's connect this to your professional life. As you grew, and I want to understand that journey because today, a dear friend of mine has brought out this series which is doing extremely well everywhere called Half CA. So I don't know if you've watched it, but if you haven't, please do watch it.
I've heard about it.
Yeah,
Someone just recommended.
So Aruna has taken it out in TV, a fantastic series, I can tell you. But it talks about one of the most underestimated courses.
Yeah.
And yet one of the most toughest courses because A, there is no shelf life to it.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that the attempts are not limited compared to the others. Second, it's aspirational at a different level. Because what matters is that signature ke pehle that CA that comes in, right? So people don't understand the grueling construct that comes to go across and be a CA.
Yeah.
So if you have to connect the fact of the mindset and how you were trained as a child and the fact that you had to succeed, you had that binary construct, did it play out in higher education as well?
Just to rewind a little, I got to Bangalore after I finished my 10th. And in Bangalore, 11th and 12th is college, right? PUC.
Junior
it's
college.
Not school anymore.
Yeah.
It's
like
junior
in
college.
Mumbai.
Like in Mumbai.
Yeah.
So, straight to college from...
Which college was this?
MES college in Bangalore. And before that, my 8th, 9th, 10th, I was in Muradabad.
Nice.
Which is Uttar Pradesh, of course, like the back of beyond. So straight from there to Bangalore and you just get pushed into this college. And I was very clear that I don't want to do science. I was not at all inclined towards science. So arts was a taboo, like what will you do with arts? So the left was commerce. So I took commerce. And in the first 2 years of 11th and 12th and then the first year of degree is where I enjoyed my college life. Where of course there were studies, but I was also part of the dance troupe in college, which went out to do a professional dancing later, etc. So I was part of that, and my life was split in college between studies and this. Come first year degree, I guess I was all of 19 at that time. Dad said, try for CA. I said, okay, why not wait and do MBA later? Dad said, no, my Tauji was a CA, both the Taujis, and he kind of said, just go for it. I said, okay, fine, let me go. And at that time, we had what we call as foundation course, which you could take right after your 12th and need not finish your degree.
Parallelly, along with the degree.
Yeah. Degree moves to being into a correspondence. And so year one into degree, I decided to take up my foundation exam. And I hoped I wouldn't pass, but I passed.
Why did you hope? This is very interesting.
I wanted to continue with my college life, right?
Okay.
I mean, because then I had to quit college and we had to start doing our articleship. We had to start working with somebody and it's cutting short 3 years of college. And of course, it's a lot of studying. I mean, CA, obviously, everybody says ratta maro, right? That goes on. But I cleared, and then my dad was like, now why are you like questioning it? Just keep going with it, right? So then I moved out of college, took the degree in correspondence, and I joined BP Rao & Co., which is a tier 2 firm in Bangalore. Again, in the family, my dad knew somebody, he got me in, quite renowned. And from day one, we were working.
Right.
Like 8 to 10 in the night, kind of work. So at the age of 20 is when I technically started working. And then you had to do your classes for studying for CA intermediate. So I used to go to the institute. I used to have some sessions, extra classes, 5 in the morning, 5 to 8, study there, get to your job, finish 10, come back home, study for another couple of hours, sleep for 2 hours. That used to be a routine. And the only fun quotient that I ever had in that was on Saturday we used to have half a day at work.
Okay.
And college used to be half a day as well. My friends were still in college. In my entire section, I was the only one who took foundation and moved out, and my rest of my gang is like having fun in college. So Saturday I used to go and hang around with them post lunch, and that used to be the only like free time that we ever had. But slowly, right, I first Saturday, second Saturday, a few months into Saturdays, then you start realizing that the way they think and the way you are thinking when you're working is so far apart.
Completely different.
Completely different. Now you can't relate to the conversations, you can't relate. So slowly that starts coming down, right? And then maybe 6 months, 8 months, then you're just kind of out of the circle and
you drift.
You have a completely different
circle.
Yeah. So while it saved 2.5 years in my life in getting to professional world, I think the piece of advice I always give anybody who's doing CA is not to lose that out. Like continue with your college, have the fun, because then there's no looking back once you're there. So those 3 years, I finished my CA in the first attempt, both the intermediate and final.
Wow.
And
so you're one of those rare 1% that they call.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, we were at that time the statistics said 0.4%.
Crazy.
Who would pass out the CA exams. So luckily I managed to pass out in the 2.5 years time frame, and so that's been.
I hear you say again something which I emphasize a lot on, and people at times try to discount it. Tell me, do you really believe, you use the word luckily, right? And there are two ways of looking at it. One is you're being modest, because that 0.4% is not easy. It's crazy.
It's hard work.
It's crazy statistics. But tell me, do you also believe that along with all the hard work, along with all the perspiration, the sweat, the tears, luck plays a very important part? I hear this nowadays a lot from a lot of founders, a lot of successful entrepreneurs, that irrespective of being in the right place at the right time and all the algos falling in place, if luck did not play out, perhaps they would not be able to build what they have built. So how much do you think you would give attribution to luck?
I think for doing your education, I don't think there's anything that's driven by luck, I would think.
So
right?
Let's take a comparative analysis. There's so many people, as aspirants they call it, right, who give everything that they have and they don't qualify for 1 mark.
May not be enough. You just fell short. And that happens.
That happens.
I fell short on my license test in the first go, right? I mean, that happens.
The driving license.
The driving license test.
I love the way that you've compared and analyzed driving license to a CA degree.
No, I mean,
I have a feeling a lot of people around the country will really appreciate this comparative analysis.
No, think about it, right? Throughout my school and my college, I've never failed in a test. Simple.
So right? you've been a geek.
I've been a geek. Oh, big time. I've been a geek. Other than the fact that I love dancing and that made me a little cool with my friends and whatever.
Yeah, we'll come to the dancing. But cool is an understatement.
On the academics, I've been a geek, no doubt. Ratamar, right? That was life. But I failed in my license test first, and that is a big shake. You won't realize it because you've never failed, right?
So you realize failure for the first time.
That never goes off in your head, right?
It stays back.
It stays back.
And even if it's something as crazily irrelevant in terms of academics as driving, because that's a part of life.
Yeah, but
it's a real life.
Luck in it? No, I don't see.
That's a different thing.
I moved from a place called Bagalkot in Karnataka to Muradabad, right? And we had Hindi as a third language. I had just probably learned the basics, the Varn and whatever. And then you get to a CBSE in Hindi, grade 8, where you're supposed to write Nibandh. Right? And
you have no clue.
You have no clue. So, can I just say, oh, I'm unlucky that I've kind of come here? And in my first test, I remember I just barely scratched through that pass mark of 1/40 or something was the...
That must have made you question
so
your
then-
own worth, given that you were always topping.
No, but it was a question like, how do I handle this, right? So you have to put an additional effort. I used to do additional classes with my Hindi teacher, and it took me a year. Grade 9 is when I started to kind of... So what I'm saying is, when it comes to education, I think
It's only about hard work?
it's hard work. It's hard work and your determination and your, I mean, who's pushing you to do
So
it.
I have a different analogy.
But the moment you move into the real world, where there are a lot of circumstances that lead you to
Which
where
is not
you
in your
are,
control.
which are not in your control, sometimes in your control, but just not. There may be luck. For me, for instance, Abler Nordic probably is some luck.
Okay.
Right? Because the timing of it, I was just there at the right time at the right place.
I remember.
I
remember
I
your
happened to
first
be
day.
there. Right? So, maybe there is some luck when it gets to the real world. But
So I'm going to connect two things, okay? I'll tell you, while I completely appreciate what you're saying, my experience has been diametrically opposite. And I'll tell you why. I was the opposite of you. So I wasn't the geek. I wasn't about ranking. For me in life, it was always about jugaad at a very, very early stage, hustle at a very, very early stage. I was a type of a student who looked at, and I used to be a little appalled, again, because I think you can put your phone on silent. You know, the fact is that you're supposed to put your phone on silent when we have a lovely conversation.
Yes.
But it's okay. You'll never follow rules. But coming back to the point, thank you for the interruption. But coming back to the point, I came from a background where, for me, and I remember this from early school days to college days, right? School mein, there used to be these toppers, and they would study the whole year. The whole year, I could just see them studying. And I would do a whole bunch of extracurriculars.
Yeah.
And you know, people know, at least in the last few episodes I've spoken about this, that I used to have these two stages in school. There was a me before a class 8 and me after a class 8. And class 8 is where I lost a year. And that's where my pivot and my 180-degree change happened in life. And before me was a person who was nothing like what you see today. Completely opposite. I used to stutter, stammer, I was an introvert. I used to have my tiffin alone because I had nobody around. And post class 8, I was the one going up to almost like a school, most well-known or most infamous, as you may call it, kind of a category. But life hacks happened from there. And one of the things I realized about life hack was that, boss, it's all about concepts in life. So for me, it was never about the ratta. For me, it was always about understanding the concepts. And for me, the recognition of ROI happened very early. So I used to see these toppers study all the year and have no quality of life. I used to do everything other than studying, all the extracurriculars, all the fun part, all the, as you call it, the debates and, different aspects of fests and participation and dances. And then I realized I would study one night before and I would get very decent marks.
Yeah.
That happened in school, that happened in college. In college, I was in a college which was under Pune University. Symbiosis at that point of time for law was under Pune University. And in university, the toppers would get 62%, 63%, because university scoring is always very low, right?
Yeah.
So these guys would study the whole year and they would get 62%. I would study a night before and get 55 to 58%.
Not bad at all.
So for me, the ROI was very clear in it.
Yeah.
So that is where I believe I was very lucky.
No, I think
Because
it's
one
not
part is
about
concept,
luck.
the
I
second
do
part
not
is
agree.
also the luck of being able to articulate in that manner that the examiner thinks that this guy is not faffing.
True, but I think that's also certain inherent qualities of people where the grasping power is better, the articulation power is better. It's not luck, right?
Yeah, it's
I
not
don't
just
think
luck.
It's luck.
I give luck a reasonably higher component of the share.
Maybe.
I want to connect another very interesting part that you said. And I want to understand how much of that shaped you. So I heard you mention Moradabad. I heard you mention, which was that place that you just said in Andhra Pradesh, the village?
Where I was born, Parigi.
No, just the other one after Moradabad.
Bagalkot was Karnataka.
Karnataka. So you have been in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 level of places, right? Tell me, as a girl growing up, and I remember another friend of mine, she spoke a lot about it in one of the episodes, Ahana. She used to, came from a place like Bharatpur, which was a very innate village in Rajasthan. And so she's very vociferous about the fact that growing up as a girl in a village or a tier 2 has been rather difficult. And there are a lot of unwanted aspects that happen. There are a lot of unwanted attentions that happen. There are a lot of unwanted aspects of gender diversity that happen. So how much, and was this prevalent also in South? Did that also shape in you being the way you are?
For me, growing up, I've never faced a discrimination because I was a girl or never. Whether it is in school, whether it is in college, whether it is at home or wherever we went, no, there was no differentiation. So I've always, it's been like this. Parents never discriminated. In fact, I was probably more the darling child than my brother for that matter.
You're the younger or the elder?
Elder. But no. So I feel it's given undue importance. But people say they do face it. I haven't. Of course, you get your stares and glares, and that's part of what it is, and you just need to know how to deal with it and move on. But discrimination per se, no, I haven't. So I probably cannot answer more than that.
So basically that's not been something that has you've perhaps spent a little bit of mind space around it.
No, even at work, be it from where I was doing my CA or Big Fours, or of course Abler Nordic is a different...
Yeah, that's a completely different story.
Different equation. But yes, the only place where sometimes you do get, you need to make your presence felt is of course in boardrooms, of course in a male-dominated meetings. You take some time to get your presence felt. But if you're talking sense, I think people do listen to you after a point. But you have to put an additional effort in the beginning.
So that little bit of that extra plus has to be there, because again, perhaps you're saying that you being the only woman in the room, you have to make that added shout.
Yeah, you probably have to sometimes, in some circumstances, not always.
So this is important. The other bit, which I feel... With this, there's one more thing I want to emphasize on. A lot of people perhaps don't give it enough importance. I know the role of dance that has played in your life.
Yeah.
And I'm using that as a form because that is something which has been your release.
Closest to me.
But it's an extracurricular. What I'm trying to go back to is the power of an extracurricular activity, and that can be anything for anyone, right? Your release, your area was dance. My release, my area was a lot with respect to sports, a lot with respect of, weightlifting and various other things. But everyone has those releases. Yeah. What people don't understand is the importance of having a parallel life.
Yeah.
And how that shapes up career, mindset, and individuality over a point of time, and how that helps in professional life.
Yeah.
So take us a bit about two things, right? One, how dance happened in your life, and what would you today take back as the few core elements of something like dance? And in this case, you've done several forms of dances, right? And you're extremely good at few forms that I know. But how did that help shape the Smriti of today? How do you connect the dots?
So, I think, as I said, what started dance for me, I also don't know. Because what I remember is I've been dancing from I have my pictures when I'm 4-year-old and I'm dancing on a stage.
Wow.
So I don't even know what started, I just enjoy it.
And this was what form that time?
Just Bollywood. I guess whatever you knew. And we were in Andhra and my parents were movie buffs. So we would watch every movie on the weekend, right? And at that time it used to be all Chiranjeevi movies I know.
Yeah.
Like the Telugu movies. So I used to dance on those songs, I guess. But yeah, anything, right?
But not more of the classical trained
I'm never trained. I'm not trained as a classical dancer because we were moving places.
Yeah.
So we never found a common theme. I actually learned Carnatic classical music along with my mum. Because mum could teach me and mum was learning and there was a continuity which we could build. But on dance, I couldn't.
So you sing?
Used to. I mean, as a child, whatever. But dancing is my passion. So, but I think throughout my school life and college life, dancing was probably 40% of my time. Right? 60% was studying, let's say. 40% was dance. Or maybe 30% was dance and 10% was everything else additional. That way. So that was my release point. And I think what it helped me is to really get out there without inhibitions, to face audience, to not know who is there in front of you and just express yourself. I think that's what kind of, for me, today if I can go out and speak to people, it's because it comes from somewhere there, right? Without having any blocks in your head, you can express your point of view. That is what I think dancing has taught me. You talk about confidence, for me it comes from there. Because, when you're facing a room full of people whom you don't even know and you have to get out there and express, and take any Bollywood song, it's all about expressions, right? So that's what it kind of builds. And the second thing...
So like blinders for you almost.
It's blind, yeah. It's a different thing that my eyesight was very weak, so I couldn't see the audience. So it helped. Yeah. But otherwise, I think...
And you were almost a semi-professional salsa dancer, if I remember correctly.
That came much later in life. Okay. Before that, in college, as I mentioned, I was part of the college troupe. And we were pretty much there in all fests across the south. And the team I was part of, they actually went out to professionally start a dance company. And there was a point in time when the choice was to move in the CA line or to join the dance. I mean, I had joined the dance company, but I had to get back because I couldn't do both
crazy.
Together.
That's like amazingly diverse.
And that's where my father played a big danda role and said nothing doing.
The middle class comes in, boss.
Yeah.
I still remember.
I used to keep telling my dad all this while that had you just not done that day, I would probably be on that stage.
Dance India dance, huh?
Dance India dance is
too low, international level.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I resonate so well with this. I used to play tennis amongst various sports that I did. I used to play state level tennis, and I remember there was a time when I think under 13, under 16, I'm not too sure, but I was seeded as a rank level, and there was a choice in life. Similarly, there came this crossroad where the thought was that do I go into regular school or do I go into professional level of tennis? And I come from Calcutta, where few of the best tennis players have come from, few of the best coaching centers were there. And I remember, and I was fortunate enough to play a lot in these clubs where Leander used to come and play regularly, or maybe those days I think Mahesh would come in at times from South. And I remember very clearly, I had this hard conversation with my father. And again, the middle class danda that you call comes in. And in hindsight, I thank him, because for him, the whole thought process was I was ready to quit school, regular school, and go to this specific type of a school which would help you play for 12 hours a day, right? And my father's observation to that was that, boss, you need to study, because in the construct of who were the who's who of tennis that time, it was Leander Pace and Mahesh Bhupati. And he was like, the chances of you being a ball boy is far higher than you being a high-level tennis player. And in hindsight, when you come back today and think about it, even after maybe 25 years of that journey, to think of the third-ranked player in India after Leander and Mahesh, people still have to give it a thought.
But it's never tested, never tried. So you can never say, right? So I always just tell this to dad, maybe after 10 years of being CA and doing whatever, that you never let me try. So you don't get a thing to say that now. So that's always there. You never.
But it's that middle class risk aversion, right?
Absolutely.
And I'll link it to another thing, right? So there was a thought process in terms of you are supposed to, and I keep saying this, right? A lot of people talk about doing what you love will lead to success. Doing what you love will lead to happiness. Doing what you love will lead to lack of burnout. But nobody talks about the fact that you can only do what you love basis the circumstance.
That is true. But it's not all. I also kind of believe that it's not always necessary that what you love is what will feed you and your family.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you can find a good balance, and I don't think I've found it in the last 10 years, but if you can actually find a balance in doing what earns money for you and you're living, and also have a good passion on the side, maybe yes.
So it's not necessary that you should earn money.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's not always necessary you take it up as a profession.
Correct.
Right. So
Correct.
that will always be there. And the point is, when you're working, I mean, I love what I do at work. So there's no question on that. So it's not that
but it's still not dance.
But that's fine.
If you compare, you can't compare the constructs of the two, because one is passion.
Yeah.
One is need, which is developed into love.
True, but
what I want to come back
at the same time,
I want to hold a thought here for a second, because the question is very relevant, and I want to ask you this for the benefit of our audience. A lot of them are in that age where they go and follow this adage: do what you love, do what you love, and it need not be, as you very correctly stated, rewarding enough to take care of the bills. My question to you, therefore, if I have to give a comparative analysis, it's not necessary that you have to do what you love for earning the bills. It could very well be that, and this is where it comes in, you're a perfect example of it, that you're doing something which you're very good at. You may not necessarily love or equate it to passion. You're loving your work, but that's not necessarily your passion. You're damn good at what you're doing. Now, when you're damn good at what you're doing, you've created a circumstance for you. You created a level for you. You created, and that level is of various aspects of comfort: social comfort, monetary comfort, philosophical comfort, which creates that cushion.
Right.
And that allows you to now take out time for that actual passion and to do what you love, irrespective of monetization, irrespective of anything going across and making it commercial. For me, I'll take an example. I believe, and I would like to believe, that I'm a reasonably good counsel. I hope you agree.
Will you give me a choice?
Depends. You have to be honest and candid on this. But I would like to believe that along with that, I managed to reach a level where today I've created an organization. Things are going the way they're supposed to go. It'll keep building. But this, what I'm doing, is a part of my true passion. Because had I been given the option of choosing what I love, I would have chosen the two. Either I would have chosen professional level of tennis, or I would have chosen theatre, because I used to do a lot of theatre. And acting is a bit, and theatre and drama is something which I love. So obviously I can't go down the path of that because I don't have the time for it. But the next closest thing is about expression.
Yeah.
And this is my form of expression. This podcast, Lifeboat, what I'm trying to do is my passion project, my way of giving back to the ecosystem. But could I have done this if I was not good enough in my mainframe to be able to take care of the bills? So my question to you therefore is, and this is more for our audience, what is your belief of doing what you love versus doing whatever you do so well that you can create that framework to do what you love? What's your thought around that?
I got confused.
It's deep.
It's very deep.
I expect it to confuse people, but you want me to simplify it?
So, no, I think there are two aspects to it, right? Like, one is making a choice for a career, right? Then at that point, you make a decision which defines the next, let's say, 20 years of your life, where you're going to spend most of your time building your life, right? That is one decision point. But once you've decided on that, does it mean that the other one should completely evaporate from your ecosystem? No. Does it mean that you have to finish those 20 years building your career and then you're in a position where you're well cushioned to follow a passion? I don't think so. Just as an example, even though I didn't choose dancing as my career, I continued with CA. I spent 18 hours in a day in filing tax returns for the first 5 years of my life as a professional, but I parked the 4 hours to dance. I continued it. It's not that I gave it up. I just didn't take it up as a profession, right? So it stayed with me until a point when I delivered. I mean, that's a different dimension that got into life. But I was dancing throughout my working life in EY. I was dancing throughout, whatever format. So that kept me going. It's not that I completely disconnected it. So I would not be able to really relate when you say that, okay, I have to give it a halt for 20 years and then come back to it and then develop and rekindle, and because it's always been with me.
I want to dwell with this a little more because I think this is beautiful the way it's going. What you're talking about is striving for something as a hobbyist. What you pursued was a hobby. And therefore, you could go across and do your mainframe work and give that 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week as a hobby.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is passion and passion project or that thing that you want to do far more than just that 2-3 hours. For example, I'm giving far more effort in terms of creating this content, right? Which includes time, which includes bandwidth, which includes me able to convince amazing people like you to come to the podcast, which I spend most of the time pleading, but thankfully, you folks like you agree and oblige. It obviously has a monetary aspect. It obviously has cost involved in it. You have these fancy people standing right here looking at me and looking at you. It's not that they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Of course, they love me, but there is a monetary cost that comes into it. Therefore, when I come back to the brass tacks is, and take back to the thought process of when you ask your dad, when you were in the crossroad, was it that your dad's advice was also based on the fact that, boss, you come from a middle class background, CA is a sure shot way to earn your bread versus dancing could be a question mark.
Yes.
So this goes back again to the circumstance. Now, take 2 steps back and assume for a second that your father was an industrialist. Assume for a second that you never had to bother about food on the table. Would you still have to make that choice? Chances are your father would have told you, you choose your path.
Yeah, quite possible.
So for me, and I keep saying this, and this is very important for a lot of our audience to understand, that doing what you love is a fantastic statement, but actually has no meaning unless you come from the circumstance that it allows you to do that. Either you're coming from a circumstance where everything is on a platter. You do what you love, you will excel. There's no doubt about it. You are a brilliant dancer, I know it, right? Had you danced, I know at what level you would have taken it out. But you come from a background like mine, where the first priority was food on the table.
Correct.
For yourself and for your family.
Yeah.
Then you have to do that thing so well that you create that ability of ecosystem to pursue your passion. Today, if you want to pursue it, you will do it much beyond a hobby. Because you have the ability to do it, you have the time to do it, you have the bandwidth to do it. Whether you want to do it is your choice. But if today someone had to ask you that you want to spend X amount of time, energy, money, you're in a position to do it. Earlier, you may not have been. So my question is far more deeper in that context.
Well, each passion has its own contours, right? It's time, it's money. Sometimes it's not money, it's just time. So I think it depends on what you're pursuing. For me, I guess the fact that I continued at it, the fact that I was still on stage, the fact that is good enough, is rewarding enough. And I don't need to reach to a point where I'm able to make it as a big part of my life or turn around and say, now I'll work only for this and spend rest of the time dancing. I don't need to do that. But what it does to me is it keeps me sane. That's my pressure release or stress buster or whatever you call it. But that's my space. And that's good enough.
True. I agree. So what you're
saying... That's where it stops for me.
And I think what's important for audience to realize is that life is about multiple compartments.
Totally.
And I am a firm believer, and you know that, I'm a firm believer of compartments in life. Compartments in terms of relationships, compartment in terms of goals, compartment in terms of aspirations. Because unless you compartmentalize life, you're confused to say that life evolves and revolves around only a couple of things. Yeah. Whereas, cut to when you're 80 years old and when you're looking back at your life, there's this beautiful thing. I call it the what if zone. And I love this shairi, so I want to talk about it to say that what is the what if zone? The what if zone is about a person always wondering about kash. Kash ye ho sakta, kash wo ho sakta. So I say this in this context. And it's very, very close to my heart in terms of the essence of it. And it talks about कि मेरी जिंदगी के हर राज में एक राज तुम भी हो. मेरी जिंदगी के हर राज में एक राज तुम. Sorry, इरशाद फरमाइए. Apologies, इरशाद फरमाइए.
इरशाद.
Thank you. मेरी जिंदगी के हर राज में एक राज तुम भी हो. मेरी बंदगी के हर आस में एक आस तुम भी हो. तुम क्या हो मेरे, कुछ हो या कुछ भी नहीं. तुम क्या हो मेरे, कुछ हो या कुछ भी नहीं. लेकिन मेरी जिंदगी के काश में
एक काश तुम भी हो.
Nice. That is the essence of what if.
Yeah.
And the what if moment is something that a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important what you're talking about, because for the audience, it's very important for them to realize that life is about multiple compartments. Life is about various aspects, and extracurriculars builds character, which helps on to create a lot of things in future life, in professional life, all of those aspects. Tell me the other part. You grew up with a sibling.
Yeah.
I grew up as a solo child, the only child. So I know how the only child construct comes in, right? There are a lot of nuances, pros, cons, mostly cons. But one of the things which is very common to being an only child and being an entrepreneur is the essence of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually helps me. So when I turned into an entrepreneur, it was a very lonely journey. I had co-founders. I was very lucky to have co-founders. But irrespective of co-founders, there is a zone where you're very lonely, and you've done that, right? You've donned the entrepreneurial hat. So I want to connect these two things together. So for me, growing up as a solo child, as an only child, had moments which were extremely lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was also a child for parents who did a very late marriage, right? So my father's 80, my mother's 70. So there was a huge age gap. It wasn't in context of new age where a lot of kids are having very young parents. So the contemporary constructs of friendship is far higher in today's world.
Yeah.
Their parents were parents. There was a huge
gap.
So there were zones when you had to only talk to yourself. So I have this brother of mine who I keep talking to, right? He doesn't exist, but he's there in my head. That's the space.
Yeah.
As an only child, you create those aspects because those are survival hacks.
Yeah.
And those survival hacks leads to deal with lots of things of helping you evolve, which also helps you later in life. When you're building something, is that same brother that you're talking to again, but in this context, more of a self-conscious conversation. But when you were growing up, you grew up as an elder child with a brother. Tell us about life with a sibling, and does that mentally have any constructs of growth and maybe customization as a character, and did that have any shaping when you turned and donned your entrepreneurial hat? So talk first about this, and then I'm going to dwell a lot about your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, I think as a sibling, when you have a sibling, for me, growing up everything was about sharing. Mm-hmm. There was always limited resources, and we are making the best of it, right? So, and the age gap for me, my brother is hardly 2 years, 2.5 years. So it wasn't even like a large gap. So a large part of my growing up years was just kind of sharing everything together. Of course, there comes a time when we're adolescents and we have our own groups and zones, and then you don't as much interact and all that happens. But then comes a time when you again are adults, and then
when you're mature enough to know the value that core value is family, and family is family.
Yeah. So if you ask my brother, he'll say I've always been in the shadow of my sister, because my sister was always like in the forefront for everything. So
a lot of your colleagues also say that. A lot of your contemporaries also say that. We'll come to that separately, but yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I was again the same dominating bossy sister, if you ask him. But at the same time, we shared a lot of things. As you said, we hid a lot of things from our parents as well. So it was all, my crime partner was him for the longest. So there's always somebody whom I can, though I would bash him up, but I knew he's always there, and he's still always there for me. So I think that will never go away, and I wouldn't know how it is to be a only child.
I like it. The lonely only child.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. The lonely child.
Yeah,
I understand.
So I wouldn't really be able to kind of compare the two.
We have to empathize with all the only children, huh? The lonely only children.
So, moving that to entrepreneurial journey, I think we were two people as well when we started First League Ventures, and I don't think I would have done it if I were alone, very honestly. And maybe that comes from the fact that I had a sibling. I've never thought about it that way, but the fact that there's always someone who's...
The beauty of this podcast is to make you think about things.
Probably. Now that you're saying, I might just... Because I would have never done it all by myself. I would have really wanted somebody to go along and be there. So we were two founders, and so I'm a little alien to the whole
Solo
lonely
journey.
concept. Yeah, solo journey. I think I've always had people with me.
So you've been surrounded by relevant people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now let's draw down this construct. So, and I want to marry this again to a concept. You were with one of the big fours after you moved on from your CA journey, joined a big four, did phenomenally well there. You led a team there. I know the kind of deals that you did there. And almost 10 years, if I remember correctly, that you spent. That's like a lifetime in a big four. I know people in 10 years who have done that we call it that...
move within the four.
No, is क्या बोलते हैं उसको यार, चार धाम, the चार धाम of the big four. In 10 years, they've circled all big four and come back to maybe now a big six. But my question to you is, 10 years is like enough time to create yourself as a familiar home zone. It's protected, it's comfortable.
Yeah.
It's the comfort zone. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody again. You're en route to partnership. You have expense account given for the clients. You have first class tickets. You have lots of things which are taken for granted. Because that's the growth, right? That's the growth part.
It's comfort zone.
It's the comfort zone. Now, from there to take a jump and a plunge to entrepreneurship. And to start that also, and I resonate so much with you because I am a professional services firm entrepreneur. And I know how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur in the professional services because हमारे पास माल नहीं है बेचने के लिए, हमारे पास product नहीं है बेचने, हम ही product है. We are the product. Our service, our time is the product. So when we are sleeping, unlike a lot of product and maybe some kind of a app or some kind of any other form of B2B service which can function and earn money even when you're sleeping as a founder, for us that's not there. As long as we are awake, we earn money. So वो 18 घंटे जो आप बोल रहे हो दिन के, I've done that for years and years in my life, right? So that's one of the most difficult journeys to transition into. Why and what would have gone across and made you realize that in spite of the comfort zone, you would want to move and experiment? And more importantly, what were the core learnings of this transition? And if you had to advise, because a lot of, again, our audience are the types where they're in that cusp, I told you, they're taking that call, whether they need to go out, whether they need to start, whether they need to leave the comfort zone of a job and, jump into this big black hole of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So take us through that mind space of yours. I want to understand that mind space to get out of a comfort zone. And I'm not going to shy away from saying this also. So don't hold me otherwise, because this podcast is a very candid podcast, right? We are the whole objective of this to have a very transparent conversation. Add on to that the gender card. Add on to the fact that comfort zone as a gender, with the construct of maybe motherhood being in the future, with the construct of maybe various other things coming into play. How and what was the mind space to say that I'll still go across and taste the blood of entrepreneurship, take that risk, understand the life there? What was that? What was the thought there? Take us through that, including your mind space as a woman.
For me, I think the 2 points were very disconnected. Leaving my comfort zone and starting an entrepreneurial journey, they had no connection.
Okay, this is interesting. Tell us.
So it was not that I left EY to start FLV. No, that was not. So when I was in EY, I think I'd reached a stage where, as you said, right, everything was going in the way it just goes. And there was not much challenge in what I was doing. Of course, the path to partnership was in front of me, but I somewhere knew that I don't think I'm cut out to be a partner in EY. And that's not something I was seeing myself do in the long run. The continuous billing that we had to generate and clients and Haji, no, I don't think that I was cut out for that. So when I delivered my son, I think there was a point where I said, okay, maybe this is an excuse. And I said, let me test it out. So what initially I did was I said, I'll do a part-time. And 6 months before, or rather when I knew that I'm going to give birth to a child, I took the last 6 months on a part-time basis and did only 4 hours of work every day. And at EY, I got that flexibility. Luckily, my partner whom I was reporting to obliged and said, yeah, try it out, why not? And then I came back after I delivered, after the maternity leave, 2 months or so, I came back, and we also had the flexibility to get our children, because we had a creche in the office. So all facilities were there and we could come to office, get our children there, feed, see them once in an hour, do your job, take them back home when you're going. All of that was set. So I can't complain that at EY, because I became a mother, I didn't have the right ammunition to continue working, which I see a lot of people take as an excuse that you don't get the flexibility, people don't understand that you're also taking care of an infant. Luckily for me, again, coming back to biases that they have, I haven't faced it. My team was extremely supportive, my partner was extremely supportive, so there was no reason to actually say that because of motherhood I left EY. Why I left EY, or I took the decision, and it was a hard one after 10 years to kind of give up, as you said, a comfort zone, right? And that was mainly because for me, I felt that I reached a point where mentally I was saturated in what I was doing. There was no extra stimulation. And if I'm away from my son and going to a place called work, that should have enough stimulation for me to be as energized and as challenged and as, moving ahead in that sense. So that's where I said probably it's just too comfortable to be in a place like this forever and challenge yourself. But I didn't know what I was challenging myself for actually when I quit. So I said, let me just quit.
Right.
And the idea was initially just to do nothing, take a sabbatical for a while, and then figure out later. Deep down, I think I always had this thing that I want to move to the investment side. I think I'd done a lot of advisory side. And the fact that in advisory, you advise, you get out, and then you really don't know what happens after, how the companies perform, where do they go from there. It just felt so superficial at times, right? So
you're making me feel very good. Thankfully, I am a little more
legal
involved.
counsels keep coming back, right?
I'm a little more involved
in the journey of a company. I mean, for us as bankers, beyond a point, it's not there really. So I think somewhere I knew that I would want to move on to the investment side, but without MBA in my kitty, without having past experience, without the big names that, EY obviously is not a name for moving to the private equity or the VC world. And there was a lot of bias there. Not because I was a woman, but because I was not from the fraternity, as they would say. So that I faced when I went for a few interviews, trying to move to the VCP side. I did get that. Maybe I did not push enough as well from my side. I just took it a little easy. But along the way, I think 3-4 months into the sabbatical, my ex-colleague also moved out of EY, and he wanted to actually start the services firm which we actually began. And he reached out, and then we kind of brainstormed, and we said that we had the expertise, we had the understanding of doing deals, and why not try it in the pre-series A angel round and see where we can at least help some founders along the way in getting some basics in place. And that's how we actually began. And we didn't begin the entrepreneurial journey thinking we'll make this into a 500-seater services firm, nothing like that. It was more to just kind of see where it goes at that point in time. Once we launched into it, is when we realized, okay, this is a whole new game, right? This comes with its own challenges, its own risks. We suddenly realized that, okay, every month we need some money coming in. This can't happen that we wait for the deals to close and only then we're going to get money. We're not Big Four and we can't cushion it. So then we started doing retainers. So we evolved as we went along. We started with something and then quickly realized that both of us need to take some money back home every month. And that's when we started with retainers. We used our relationships, and in 3 years we added a couple of people to the team. Somehow it kind of went from there. So 3 years we spent just building it, and then came a point, I think, where again it was a pivot or a decision point for both of us. One incident which kind of shook both of us was a transaction where we supported the company for like almost a year in raising funds. It was a tough one. And one of the big giants actually decided to invest, and we got them on the table. We actually closed the round, and then they decided to not pay us fees because we were some small-time bankers. that was like, I mean, what the hell, right? You spent a year and then you get this, and then the promoter also was like, I can't do much. The investors are saying this. And then you realize like, what was this worth for, right? I mean, I think that was probably a shake point for both of us. And we decided, or we came back to the drawing table and said, listen, do we really want to be at the mercy of people like this who don't want to oblige, or at least, I mean, pay us the due, right? So then we just said, let's not take any more deals for now. We closed whatever we're working on. And as I said, the key of moving on to the investing side was there in me. That continued. I was looking out to see where, we were actually working with some VCs to help them on the sourcing of deals as well. So kind of understood that side a little bit and all of that. And my partner was looking at doing additional higher education or additional studies at that point. So somehow kind of culminated, and after 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, we said, let's take a stop, let's halt it here. We found jobs for people whom we had employed to go into respective right places, and then we went our ways. And luckily, and that's where luck played for me. And that time, Abler Nordic sought out and wanted to start the India team, and it somehow kind of, out of nowhere, I got a call. Out of nowhere, I got a call from a random headhunter. Some Norwegian fund somewhere. What is microfinance? I mean, I had no clue. And I just went for this interview randomly to see, okay, what is this? And
And cut to today, you head the India team.
Yeah, and it's been a fantastic journey.
So we're going to talk about that journey, but
yeah.
there are two very important draws from what you just said. And I want to touch both of them. One, and I've written down here, while you were saying, I took some notes because it's very interesting.
You had notes?
Yeah, I mean, like, to just remember it, because, conversation between you and me is so crazily good that I'll just move on to the next one. But tell me, there are two, and I want to go one by one. You made a statement, and in between you said that you also, while you were trying out for VCPE roles, before you went and donned this hat, one of the things that came as a restriction was the lack of an MBA as a degree.
MBA from
an Ivy League.
Ivy League institute, yes.
Ivy League. Today, you are the India head of perhaps the most marquee fund in the sector that you work in, which is predominantly microfinance and financial intrusion-oriented services. You still don't have an MBA from an Ivy League.
No.
So why I say this is relevant is, again, from the perspective, and always I keep asking these thought processes from the view of the view of the audience. I keep saying founders and audience, it's crazy, but view of the viewers. Okay, the view of the viewers, because I'm used to very live audience, right? So it's always audience, but here in this case, the viewers. How much of relevance would you therefore play, and how much of it would you give? How much relevance does the role of an MBA and Ivy League play, or does it come back to, and which I am a very vociferous cheerleader of, I genuinely believe institutions may have an added advantage, but they are not the final count.
Yeah.
The person is the final count.
Yeah.
I come from none of the equivalent of the hallmark institutions in my profession, which would be the national colleges and all the lovely Ivy League equivalents of what is there. I don't have an LLM or a master's from one of those fancy places. All I had was on-field experience and work that I did. And today I have people from the same Ivy League equivalent, same hallmark institutions, same LLMs as a part of Vertices. Nobody works for me, I work for them.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of our firm, right? They're all part of my team.
Yeah.
We are all building this together. So I personally believe it's all about the person.
Yes.
So coming back to the question first that I want to talk about, MBA for our audience,
Yeah.
the importance of MBA versus the fact that someone like Smriti can make it to the top without that. So what are the thought processes around it? How easy is it? How difficult is it? Are you an aberration? Or do you think at the end of the day, your learning is that there are certain pointers that if one ticks, you can be where you are today? Or that particular person can be where you are today?
Yeah. If you have a degree from one of these Ivy Leagues, maybe it's easier as an entry point, for sure, into the PVC world. I don't think I can refute that. But what I also see is that a lot of people who I now interact or have interacted in the last few years are from these Ivy League organizations, but let's say don't understand accounting, which I understand very well, right? And therefore, a lot of things which they overlook, I'm able to catch. And I can see that, right? I mean, they're talking sometimes completely out of, I don't even want to say what, but no logic, no sense. But I can catch it. And even when we interview for our own teams, we've been building our teams as well. I think, come back to this, that I don't think having a degree from one of this is a certification of anything at all. Maybe you're groomed well, maybe your persona is kind of in a certain way, and maybe as a chartered accountant, a lot of them will fail on that front. Luckily for me, I think because I had EY as my foundation ground, right? And we were grilled. Like, I mean, there's no tomorrow. Like, we had to do everything, and that was the foundation stone, and that had groomed me, helped me integrate probably into this world slightly easier, which might be difficult for a typical CA background who's been practicing as a CA and not had this exposure. For me, the fact that I had exposure to deals, transactions into this world helped me ease it. But there is this bias. I wouldn't kind of take that out of it. And for both sides, I mean, whether you're CA, MBA, I think after 10 years of experience, it doesn't matter. Maybe it matters when you enter a certain line and you choose a certain line. But after that, it's your experience and how you use it to your advantage that really matters, I feel.
So you're saying that at the end of the day, finally, it's again going back to a lot of what I was saying. It's about the person.
It's about the person.
It's an added tool. So basically, one of the Ivy Leagues will always be a fantastic ammunition in your repertoire, but it's not necessary that is the only point. At all. So that's very important again, because a lot of our audience may think that is perhaps the only way that a door can get opened. The idea is that you have to have the ability in you as a character to be able to get that foothold, and then it's about your persona, how you knock down the door.
Yeah, the door can get opened, but knocking down the door comes with, absolutely.
How you are, what your character is all about.
Yeah.
I want to now address one more very important point that you mentioned. And this may have a lot of relevance in terms of mindset of you wearing an investor hat. Technically, as an entrepreneur, the reason for not remaining an entrepreneur was another entrepreneur.
Meaning?
The founder who refused to go across and pay the fees.
Right, yeah.
So that was a shocker.
Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur, when you face a situation like that where a fellow entrepreneur, it may be a different sector altogether, but at the end of the day, it's still a fellow entrepreneur, right? And you see that becoming a situation where you see a character trait coming in. To say that you can't rely on that. And perhaps that's where a situation of mindset comes in to make that transition. Today, when you're wearing an investor hat, does that create, or did it ever create two questions? Did it ever create a prejudice, therefore? To say as a result of the prejudice, the litmus test for choosing the founder who you'll invest with is going to be far more higher, far more stringent. Second, does that come in the way of decision making ever? Or have you let that go as a past episode and said that as an investor, you look at far more aspects of parameters?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I think you have to let it go. Because if you carry that, then you'll not be able to invest in any entrepreneur. Forget anything else, right? You can't make any investment. No, that has to go. But I think what it teaches you is to look at some of the smaller nuances as to what the entrepreneur does or says when he's under pressure from an investor. How does he react? Does he buckle? Does he fight back? So it brings a lot about integrity, questions on being true to what you're saying you want to do. I mean, The entrepreneur always promised us that the fees will come, but then it didn't, right? Because he came under pressure. And now as an investor, I think when we read entrepreneurs or we talk to them or we are assessing them, it comes as an important learning.
Can I pause you for a second there? Is it that the entrepreneur came under pressure from the investors and therefore it was an investor-driven decision? Or was it that the entrepreneur used that as an excuse? How does one determine the litmus test there?
Well, I guess it's both to some extent. It came from the investor that I know of, because I spoken to the investor and I knew that they were not keen on paying us. But if I were the entrepreneur, I would have fought back. Right? Because the services were provided. We had spent, everybody knows we had spent how much time we had spent, much more than what we were getting paid for. And it's not, we were not even getting paid as success fee or something. It was just like one amount we had agreed. Yeah. So then the role of the entrepreneur comes in, whether he or she fights for it. And that's the test, right? The investor is saving money. He is doing what he thinks is good for the company and his investment. It boils down to the entrepreneur, how he or she kind of takes it from there and what kind of
what
relationship
you were getting to is the ballsopreneur, which is correct. It's okay.
Yeah,
the entrepreneur
so.
with balls.
Yeah.
So, but you're so right, because it's again a character test, right? It's about sticking to a decision and building relationships.
Yes.
And life is all about relationships. Yeah. Cut to Abler Nordic.
Yeah.
Tell us about Abler Nordic a little bit. Tell us about how that Smriti, who I met almost about now 8 years ago, from joining to leading to becoming one of the most important and relevant people in the system, because I know the maximum amount of deals that has been done by Abler has been done under your aegis. How has it been interacting in an ecosystem which is not at all Indian, but becoming such an integral part of it, coming from India? What also is very important after this is, and we'll break it up a little bit. So let's first talk about a lot of people who may want to follow your trajectory, who may want to follow your footsteps to get an entry into a fund like this. What does it take? How has the journey been? Any surprise elements, any shocks? What are the aspects of customizing your thought process? Take us through again the mind space of your journey, right from entry to where you are today.
Well, entry for me was luck.
Okay.
So I can't say more than that, because I didn't even know how it fell into my lap, really. So yeah.
And this was without even applying, without even your resume floating around with a headhunter.
No, it's never been there anywhere.
So this is where the relevance of luck, which
I guess that's
we discuss, comes into a
great
great extent.
Yeah. So yeah, headhunter reached out after seeing my LinkedIn profile, I think. So that is what she tells me. But so I just got a call one fine day, and I just went for the interview. So it's as simple as that. So I don't have anything beyond that to really say how I got into Abler Nordic. But at that time, our CEO Arthur had come down to interview. So we had few rounds, and then I think it just clicked in terms of what they were looking for and what I was looking for. Of course, the sector is completely new. I'd never even known that there is something like microfinance that exists in our country. And I should be ashamed of that, but yeah, it didn't exist for me. So I read up, I did the bit of...
The geek in you came back.
The geek in me came back at that point in time. And I think I will give it to Dinkar, my husband, because I was very skeptical. I was like, this is some Norway, I haven't even heard of this country, like we don't even know what this place is. And somebody from there is coming to interview. And so he did a little bit of research work for me, and I think he kind of pushed me into it, very honestly. He said, even on the day of the interview, I remember I was like, really, like, should I go or am I wasting time? And just go. And I think then that's just a start. And the fact that, Arthur is who he is it just helps you.
He's a unique guy.
He's a unique guy.
He's a unique guy.
He's an exceptional boss to have.
Yeah, I've had fun every time I met him.
Yeah. So but then that was the beginning. And yes, in my work, I deal with two different cultures, completely different, right? And in all shape and form and whatever you get.
So for our audience, dwell a little deeper in it, because one is so grassroots.
Yeah.
And is a completely different India. because when you go into field, that is where you see a very grassroots level.
Yeah.
Founders are very different because the mindset of a founder to go into grassroots and build versus a mindset of a founder building a consumer brand is completely different. So the founder is very different, and the ecosystem where you come from, which is perhaps in terms of at least ideologies, thought processes, is Western, right? Totally. How do you marry? So take us through this beautiful flowchart.
Yeah. So I think the whole aspect about impact investment now is completely abused. But at that time when I was trying to get a understanding of what does this really mean, I think is when I started to look at why Abler Nordic was set up, what is the thinking behind it, etc., etc. And that kind of started with the whole empathy to the founders and to the customers whom we deal with, because then that's where your money is really flowing into and helping. But to understand that entire ecosystem, it took me a while, because coming completely from a capitalistic mindset where you invest, you exit 10x, that's what you're looking for. I mean, that was the understanding, making money, right? But here it's much more than that. Yeah. So there was a little bit of gear shift for me as well in my thinking. But that helped in kind of building this bridge, because even for the fund, it's important to know that there is a business here and it's not always just empathy. There has to be sustainability, there has to be money that kind of generates income and business sense.
At the end of the day, there's a return on investment.
Yes.
The ROI is there. It may be a lower margin, but it has to be there.
Yeah. So marrying the two expectations is important. But coming back to how, so at Abler Nordic, we support financial service institutions which focus on bottom of the pyramid customer segment, low income population. And as you said, therefore, it's two diverse worlds. The money in Norway, the money that is set aside for us is actually impact capital. So they expect returns, but it's not there to just make money, right? So the mindset is very different of where we should invest.
Right.
We can't invest in everything that looks like it's going to make money. So for us, a lot of convincing needs to be done internally when we are looking at a deal as to why we should be doing this deal. At the same time, on the other side, we have Indian founders who have a very different mindset, right, on how they think about the business. But at the heart of it, if they've started to do something in this space, there is always something to give back to the society, is why they would have started it in whatever form and shape. And for us, again, that becomes the core as to why we should invest or back a certain founder. And for me, it's funny because I need to keep changing or behaving differently in these two worlds, right? You need to start speaking the same language. And that was a learning curve for me. I think in this role, if I were to look at what I've learned, I had to shed a lot of things that I'd learned, unlearn far more, and then build a trajectory for my own development as an individual and professional. But what helps is we have a great team back in Oslo that has always supported us and have complete faith in what we are seeing in the market and what we propose as possible investments and why we should do, and so that really helps.
One of the things that you said, and again, not that I'm emphasizing on any particular platform, but you mentioned that the headhunter reached out to you completely basis your LinkedIn platform.
I am assuming
You're assuming that.
Yes.
But if today you had to come back and look at it from a hiring hat, because you're also building your team, you're regularly hiring. For a lot of our viewers, I want to also understand, not that I favor any particular platform, but professionally we know that LinkedIn is a very relevant platform that is there in the country. How much of importance do you give in terms of building a LinkedIn profile? Do you believe
personally, you mean?
Personally, for not for you, but from a hirer's hat. If you had to hire somebody, other than maybe a headhunter coming and giving you a resume, how much of credence would you give about that same candidate's LinkedIn profile when you will do your deep dive? Because you will look at that. What I'm coming back in terms of our viewer is to understand that if someone has to look at working in an organization like Abler, working with an individual like Smriti, does the platform in which the professional element of data that can be factored immediately, does that actually have a bearing? Or does it again come back to the interview that day and that moment of luck?
No, absolutely. So I think even Abler Nordic for that matter are very traditional when it comes to this. While LinkedIn profile may be an entry point or a start point to look at, okay, where you have been in the organization and to have some premeditated kind of thoughts, okay, you might have worked on this or you might have done this or that, but that's where it stops. I think the process for us to hire, and if for me as well, personally, if I want to add somebody to my team, it comes back to that day, that interview, and how the person would react to that interview. And of course, we do our case studies and all of that. So, but more judging the persona of the person. Yeah.
So it's like a catalyst, but again, it's just a relevant tool.
It's like how you have lead origination.
So it's a lead gen platform that you factor it in.
Absolutely.
Fair.
I think that's where it stops.
I think that's valid. But yeah, learning again for guys is that you need to focus on your platform, and your so-called LinkedIn presence. But coming back, the resume that you submit, you need to be able to defend that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's core. Like I do, now I do.
Unfortunately, we use that to cross-question a lot of things, and we see people failing on that very badly.
Yeah, I was about to tell you that now I perhaps only sit on very high-level hiring in my firm, because firms now grown in size and their whole processes, there's HR heads and all of that. But I see so many people at senior level also, where they can't bat and justify what they've put in their resume, and that for me is a big red flag.
Yeah.
So now let's get a little more into the role, which is very exciting, right? There are two parts. I want to deal with one part, which is again gender-based. You are on the board of some of the most well-valued names in this sector that you work with. Quite a few of those boards perhaps would have been where you're the only woman, or you were the only woman at a point of time.
Yeah.
Quite a few of them is where you would have to, like you stated a little while earlier, showcase maybe slightly more of a louder side of yours to be able to be heard. But over a point of time, I think everyone understands you, everyone knows you. My question to you, for the benefit of our viewers, as a woman, and there will be people who might also be in a position, hopefully, who are looking at that or who are looking at different constructs. And I see this myself, right, as an advisory board member in so many companies that I am in, and some companies as an independent director. I see a lot of intangibles that come into value, which is not gender agnostic. That intangible somehow I feel at times is concluded and assumed that the man will be making more sense than the woman. And I find that appalling at times. And that's where I've seen a lot of times where even at my end, I would push the agenda to say that it's at par. In fact, that's one of the reasons that at vertices, 63% of vertices is actually women. And that's something that, my better half Archana would have ideated at the very concept of when we had, gone across and created the firm. But coming back to the situation today for learning for people, do you feel that there is a sense of difficulty more because of the gender being on the board? Do you think it evolves over a point of time? And to add to it, the third question, do you think that there are any specific learnings that you would like to give out to a lot of young women who will be moving in your shoes and hopefully getting into certain board positions?
On the first one, I think I wouldn't say always, but there will be few boardrooms where you will face a bit of resistance because you're a woman. Traditional places, they wouldn't talk to you eye to eye, right? So that you experience. I can't shy away from that. And I think, as you said, once they know that you're talking some sense, then they listen to you. But you need to talk some sense.
Of course.
And of course, yeah.
In a board, if you're talking
because
nonsense,
I've also seen boards where there are women and they're there because they're a women and they don't make sense. That should not be the case.
But that's like a tick in the box kind of a thing.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So because some investor has invested and said you need to have a women director, you get people with absolutely no background and relevance, and then it's just a nuisance. I've seen that side too. So for the women folk, I would say if you are taking up board positions, think through it. Whether you really want to be on this board and whether you are being brought on the board to actually add value, or it's just tick in the box.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, otherwise it's waste of time.
Don't be an ornament.
And it's a nuisance actually for well-functioning board at times. I've seen that side too. But I've seen a side where I have had to struggle in one or two situations to be heard. But I've also felt that maybe I'm just, I don't know if it just works with me, but it's not as biased as people make, and I've said this before, it's not as biased as people make it out to be. If you are talking logic, if you are making sense, you will be given an ear. Unless it's like completely narcissistic or completely like different setup, which I don't think we will kind of be there in such a kind of situation. But reasonably well run companies, good boards, you have to be logical about what you're saying. At the same time, the piece of advice that I would give is that in order to prove your point or make your point, don't always bulldoze through things. I think, as I said, I think listening is a very key component which most of us lack. And if you don't listen and respond and just respond, nobody will take it seriously. So you have to listen, resonate why the person is saying or the founder is saying what he's saying. Question it by all means. I mean, have a logic when you're questioning. Just because you need to make a point or prove your point, you don't have to voice it and be loud and heard. That's not how it works.
That's like hollow sound.
Absolutely, and that becomes irritating, and that's when you lose the respect, right? So you need to be very choosy on what battles you really want to push, fight, make your point on. Yeah.
What you're highlighting is very interesting. I want to loop in a thought, and I want to hear your reaction to this.
Okay.
You know.
All sensitive topics now.
No, nothing that you will not talk about. These are things that you would love to talk about. I can assure you that. I have the privilege of advising a bunch of women. You know that. You also know that I have a whole bunch of women, founders, investors, as very dear friends of mine.
Yeah.
And I keep hearing both sides, right? I've seen both sides. My role and my ability of what I do allows me to see a very broad spectrum.
Yeah.
I've heard this a lot of times from a lot of women, that women are the largest crabs in the crab basket created by the women.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that instead of supporting each other,
you pull each other down. Yeah.
Marry this to the concept of where you're in a board. I know you make so much of sense. I've seen you in action, right? But assume what you just said, that there is an ornament / nuisance value person also on the board. Because that person had to be there for XYZ reason. Now, as a woman, you see another woman and you perhaps resonate with the thought process that this is not making any sense.
Yeah.
But you also know that you're the only other woman on the board.
So?
My question therefore to you is, do you deal with it with sensitivity? Do you bring in the construct to say that you'll perhaps discuss and, bring the directive of the conversation in a manner to subtly make the person understand that this may not be a way to look at it, this might be the perspective to look at it, and therefore have that gender bonding to try and save and create a boundary?
I'm just not that maybe.
Or would you
I would use the same lens.
Yeah. Would you be as harsh, irrespective of the fact that it's a woman?
Yeah, I would be. Unfortunately, that's how it is for me. For me, it doesn't matter who is on the opposite side, whether it's a male or a female, right? If you're making sense, you're making sense. If you're not making sense, you're not making sense. And there's not much time for me to spend.
But do you feel a lot of resistance then as a result of this, where the other person takes it to the ego to say that Smriti is just trying to put me down because she's just not understanding my logic, even though the other person doesn't realize she's illogical? Have you faced that situation?
I don't think I've faced that straight away, as you are putting it out to be. Because any which ways, whether it's a male or a female, I would have tried to do it the softer way first. Try and make them realize
You have
that,
a softer way, is it?
Yeah, I do have a softer way. You wouldn't have seen it, but I do have a softer way.
No, my team would have seen it.
They'll vouch for it, I'm sure now.
I'm a little privileged, but yeah.
But no, I think I would, as I said, I think we try to drill sense, whether irrespective of who it is on the other side, and if it doesn't work, then you have to be straightforward about it. And again, it doesn't matter who it is on the other side. For me, there's no differentiation. I've never felt that differentiation, and I don't differentiate.
You don't differentiate.
No.
Brilliant.
It doesn't even hit me.
It doesn't even hit you.
It doesn't even hit me.
Come back now to another very interesting part. This is where I think the biggest learning comes for our audience. As an investor, what are those 2 to 3 absolute imperative aspects for you to say that this is the founder that you want to back? And what are those 2 to 3 absolute red flags? Even though the numbers may be brilliant, the statements may be brilliant, the due diligence may be brilliant, but they're absolute red flags for you to say that this is not the founder I want to back. And the reason I ask you this is also because of the fact that you are the geek who understands the history, the background, the skeleton, all of the company through the financial statements, because the financial statements of the company articulates everything. So assuming the financial statements articulate everything positive, but yet what are those red flags? If you have to divide these into 2 channels of conversation, investor hat of Smriti, the 2 to 3 absolute ticks and go ahead constructs for a founder, the 2 to 3 absolute no-goes and the red flags for a founder.
It's hard to really bucket it because it's again very circumstantial, but if you were to really look at it
it's not supposed to be easy. My questions are supposed to be interesting, not easy.
No, I think when you meet a founder, right, you do get a sense of the authenticity of the discussion, right? I think that for me is a first.
Define authenticity.
Well, you get to know what the person is. He really kind of just talking for the heck of it, or there is some substance in what he's saying. And I think that is not as black and white. It's more gray. It's more judgment. It's more your feeling. It's more your gut feeling that comes into play, which you cannot define and put it in brackets, what is plus and what is minus. It's somewhere in between. But yes, one for us, I think from as an investor, when I speak to promoters and entrepreneurs, first thing for me is that are they passionate about, at least for our field, it's very important. Are they passionate about what they're doing?
Why do you say only for your field?
Because I've also met a lot in my past avatars. I've also met entrepreneurs who are doing it for the business, just to make money and make money for everybody and exit at a point in time. So that's a clear goal, which is fine.
There's nothing wrong about it.
Absolutely no.
In fact, I would think in India, for some reason, investments are far more celebrated than exits.
Yes, you're
and
right.
that's a fact, right? It's if I may say, funding is over glamorized, but exits are what matters the most.
Correct. That's true.
From that perspective,
we don't have that much exits also
I agree.
to
Therefore,
glorify.
You're right. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong. Absolutely no. No, I think what I mean is, well, of course, he is there to run a business. Right? He is there to make money for himself, create value. That has to be there. Otherwise, it goes the other side.
Money for everyone.
Money for everyone and for himself.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not taking that away. But is it something more than that which is driving him? Right? Like giving back to the society in some format, helping somebody, or creating some value, or solving a problem which today is not being addressed. So what is the driver that is really getting this founder to work on this particular segment space? So the why and how of it is something which we get a lot deeper into to understand, what is the genesis, where is it coming from, and how long can he sustain on this path. So I think that's the first.
That's the core of the first.
That's the core. Actually, I think that's the first and the last.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come to think of it, that defines the entire investment process for us, because that defines what kind of rights he will negotiate with us, what kind of XYZ, right? So I think it boils down to that, and of course the regular checks on integrity and those are
those are
given.
ticks in the box. Those are given.
So those
I'm
are
talking
there.
more about the intangible elements.
The
Anything else?
intangibles is more about what drives him.
Can I ask you another
the-
question? As an investor, do you appreciate a founder who spends more time negotiating the documents? And therefore, one way of looking at it is that the person is that much more serious about what he or she signs and therefore is defending? Or are you of the mindset to say that as long as the founder only bothers about the must-haves, that's what matters, because end of the day, the founder should concentrate on building the business as against spending too much time on those parameters of protection. What's your thought on that?
The latter, of course. So, even we don't want founders to sit and negotiate the documents with us forever, right? I mean, there are some things which are a given, there are some things which are non-negotiable. I'm sure he or she as a founder also has that non-negotiable.
I'm asking this all the more because while I know the entire mindset of Abler because of what we do for Abler, but also for the broader purpose of our viewers.
Yeah, no, as an investor, I think if the founder kind of doesn't question anything at all and just...
Isn't that a red flag?
It is a red flag. Of course it's a red flag. So that's what I was getting to. When you talk about red flags, is it just that he's raising money for just keeping the business going and doesn't bother about what is happening to the cap table, what happens to the rights, is not thinking through it? It's a red flag. Definitely. But that kind of comes a little later in the process. I think the initial decision point happens more on gut, whether you really can have a business, have a relationship with the founder like this, right? Who understands, appreciates the value of an investor. There are a lot of founders who don't.
Yeah.
They're just there for the money. And that sometimes is not right.
So, to take a crux on the green flags or the must-haves, one is the what and how. The other bit is, of course, the maturity of the founder. How much do you rate as an investor the power of interpretation of the intangible? For example, the intangible of saying that it's not just the check that the investor is bringing in, but perhaps a lot more of value, be it in terms of doors to be able to be opened, be it in terms of further connections, be in terms of ability to draw much larger institutional investors on the cap table because of the pedigree. And therefore, because of those, the founder understanding the value of it and perhaps giving in those 5 to 10 basis points the valuation and saying, I'm not going to stick too much on the valuation because in the intangible, in the long run, I'll make much more than that. What's your take on that?
Not all founders think that way. There's very few founders who have the maturity to understand this, right? In our early stage world, I think founders just want the money at the start point, right? Whoever is giving the money at a better valuation, they'll go after it. It's only probably second time entrepreneurs who kind of understand this a little bit more as to what kind of investors you should have on the cap table, what you should not for your own business, and what kind of value add do you expect from the investors.
So do you see this? Sorry, go ahead.
There is a clear distinction according to me, the way early stage founders behave and understand this. But end of the day, I think the disproportionate importance to just raising the money is also there. I mean, the value that we as investors bring in probably range from 10% to 30%. But the larger part is always obviously the funds that is getting invested and the business that needs that funds.
So do you see a lot, and given that now Abler has started coming in a lot in the Series B stage, so do you see a lot of this mindset shifting in a little bit of more mature founders because they've raised maybe a couple of more rounds, they've raised and discussed with a couple of more institutional investors who are on their cap table.
Yeah.
And therefore the value of an intangible is being seen far more by these founders.
For me personally, I think when we speak to founders, few things which does stick out very clearly. The first one for me is when the founders don't have their market known, like they don't know what they're operating in, who their competitors are, what are the different nuances, and they come and just stitch a story for you. And you know that they don't have depth in it. I think that's the first thing that kind of is a big no-no.
And how often do you see this?
Many a times founders come to us and especially now that we understand microfinance, let's say, and we see founders coming and talking to us about the sector, having no clue who the players in the sector are, which is very bizarre because it's such a well-tracked sector now. But there are founders who do that, and especially if I look at a lot of fintech founders as well, right, who are trying to build new businesses, and then they pitch to us that this is the market and this is the size and this. And then when you start drilling that down and asking them for specifics,
the granular questions,
they have no clue what we're talking about, and that happens quite often. A piece of advice to all the founders who are reaching out to investors would be that you need to have your story airtight. Make sure you're well on top of your numbers, the market, the competition, the different players in the ecosystem, and how you as a founder are ready to navigate your business through the entire ecosystem. I think that's absolutely number one. That's where you kind of get tested, the depth of where you stand with your idea and with your business. The second aspect would also be, I would say, be very clear on why you're raising funds. Is it for growth? Is it for just working capital? Or is it just for getting your name out there that you want to raise funds while your business actually doesn't need it? And you have actually levers in your existing business which can generate enough money to sail you through.
So do you see this happening? Do you see this happening, Smriti, that a lot of times do you face founders who come in with the concept of raising funds because of glamour?
I wouldn't say just glamour, but I think there's just been a lot of hue and cry or publicity around raising funds, that your name need to be out there, that you're continuously raising funds, and therefore the name gets recognized in the VC world or the PE world. There is that thought which has got built around it. So sometimes
you're saying there are founders who believe that the credential or the hallmark of being successful as a founder is the number of times they actually raise funds. So it's a very interesting question. Why am I asking you this? There's a reason I'm asking you this. Dekh, एक founder के मेरा thought ये है, एक founder के लिए ना, at least I believe as an entrepreneur, the most important commodity जो मेरे पास है, वो मेरा equity है, जो मैं पकड़ के रखना चाहता हूँ. I don't want to dilute it for the sake of dilution. I don't want to dilute it unnecessarily. So, is this something that you've actually seen? Because this is again something which goes back to our audience to learn from the fact that what I hear you to say is very logical, right?
Yeah.
Which is, if you don't need the money,
don't raise it. Absolutely. So, I have seen business plans where founders come to us, and this usually, of course, doesn't happen in the pre-Series A, Series A. This starts happening Series B onwards, correct, right? Where the business has reached a certain level of scale. And actually, you can visibly see that if you have a controlled growth, right, you can actually turn it profitable and then, start accumulating money over it. But people just want to continuously raise funds. And in the process, I've also seen business plans where cash is just getting accumulated in the business, right? And that cash is lying in fixed deposits, and now I'm getting a little technical, but cash is getting deposited as term deposits for like 5-6%, while you're continuously raising money and diluting yourself for an equity return of 30% plus.
And that's the most expensive form of capital.
Absolutely, but people or founders don't understand that relation. They don't understand that, you have generating cash business, then why do you need to raise funds? And you need to really ask that question every time you're out in the market to raise funds, for me.
So your second takeaway, especially for our audiences, as a no-go, is if you're trying to raise money either out of pressure or out of FOMO, because a lot of times capital raising is also about FOMO.
Yes.
Or about the fact that you just want to scale without understanding the power of profitability.
For me, yes. That comes first. For me, for me and for Abler Nordic as well, I would say, I think the business model which is, I might be actually now being few of the many investors out there, but investing into a business which is perpetually into loss making, I guess, makes no sense. Absolutely no sense.
What is the third largest no?
Third one for me clearly would be if the founders wear multiple hats or have multiple businesses or interests, I think that's a complete no-go. If they are after a particular business trying to grow and scale and looking at investors to come and fund them,
True.
absolutely your entire time, everything should be, and interest of course, should be aligned to that business. But I have seen a lot of founders who have done a reasonable job of scaling a particular business but also have multiple interests or running other ventures. For me, that's not
So दो नाव पे रह के आप पैर वैसे भी
नहीं चला सकते. कभी ना कभी तो वो split होगा.
कभी ना कभी split होगा.
And then you will be split half.
Then you'll be split half.
Yeah.
Unless, and I want to put a twist to it again because of the advantage that we see so many things. Unless those businesses are complementary to the main business.
That's a different thing. Then there's
and
a business rationale.
Then your business rationale and you're consolidating. Even though you may raise separate capital in that separate entity.
That doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter.
As long as the economic interest is aligned. That's
True.
what matters, right? I mean, otherwise, completely diverse businesses. I've seen, it can also be that founders have raised a certain business into a certain level and then try something new. That's possible, but as long as you're finding a home for that, it's run autopilot, you don't have any further interest in it, why not? But at the same time, running multiple businesses, that's a bit of a red flag for us.
I think it's extremely important, and especially for our audience, these are very, very important learnings. And for people who are wanting to raise capital, and more important, not just necessarily just the niche sector of financial services that you deal with, but I think what you're saying is very broad-based in terms of investor outlook.
Yeah.
And I think it's sector agnostic. Irrespective of the sector, what you're talking about is great learning for founders or to-be founders or people who want to go across and perhaps enter that journey of fundraising. I think these are very important learnings. Now coming to the other side, which is equally important, the value of having good advisors. And you have come from an advisory role business.
Yeah.
Before that, you were in an advisory role job. So yes, there might be a little bit of prejudice that I may talk about in terms of this, but I discuss this with all my other guests on the podcast because I think one thing that has resonated is the unending importance of having the right advisors.
Yeah.
Today, you have donned the hat of being an investment banker in the past. You're donning the hat of a fantastic investor. You're half a goddamn lawyer because you make my life much more easier. My team can't say so because my team can't say so because you make their life miserable because again of the questions that you keep asking them, but they all adore you. Question now to you is from a perspective, and again a lot of takeaway for the viewers in context of you looking at this not just as an investor, but someone who's going to be on a cap table of a company soon, right? And once you're on the cap table, everyone's on the same side, hopefully.
Yeah.
At least that's the aim, that's the thought, and that's the vision.
90% of the time.
Yeah, that's the vision.
Yeah.
So tell us the role that you think good advisors play. How have you seen it evolving? Let's talk a bit about that in your journey, as well as when you move to the side where you could go across and cut the check, when you could go across and take the decision. How have you seen that evolving? What matters to you?
Well, yeah, the advisors, right? So as an investor or as a founder.
Before that, do you like the fact that between our break, the chai has come? How is the chai? It's made well in the house, isn't it?
Yes, it's very nice masala chai and I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. This is also a client, by the way, which I won't name right now.
I can probably guess, but that's okay.
Go on.
No, I think what I was saying is for a founder or as an investor, irrespective, advisors are there to help us in our decision making, right? So there are specific areas where either of us don't have expertise, and we're not expected to have expertise in all areas. And that's where we take help of advisors, and it's absolutely essential to have the right set of advisors at the right time for the organization or for us as investors. But I would also say that at some point, it tends to get a little extreme that you don't start thinking on your own feet, I would say, and just blindly go with what advisors say.
Does that happen if you have especially good advisors?
No, not necessarily. Sometimes, unfortunately, even if it's a bad advice, people blindly follow it because an advisor is saying it, right? Without thinking through it or without applying and why and how, and a lot of time it happens.
I'm sure.
Lot of time it
happens. Has
happens.
it ever happened with you?
Not with vertices, I'll clarify.
No, with you. Forget
With
vertices
me?
for a second. Have you ever had a situation where you've not thought through, irrespective of what your advisor said? I don't think that would ever happen.
Maybe in early days.
Okay.
Early days of my work experience, when we were doing deals and we would have heard lawyers as part of a deal advise something and maybe not thought through and understood why somebody is saying
that
what
in
they're saying.
your journey as a co-advisor. I was talking about your journey as an investor.
As an investor, I think a little bit more maturity had come in by then. So you tend to kind of filter out what you're hearing. But it does happen. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Let's say it's an advice on tax, which you absolutely have no clue what the legal nuances implications are, and sometimes you might just blindly kind of say, oh, if this is what the section is saying, you just go by it, and that's happened. In some of our transactions, it happens. But then you need to step back and think through as to why this law came in or why this particular section came in and what does it have relevance to our, which I feel a lot of times get missed out. You just follow blindly what the advisor is telling you, whether it is the founder or the investor, equally to blame, and stop applying yourself. So, and also when it comes to decision making, it's important to take inputs, but not rely solely on the advice you're getting. You need to consult, you need to have different points of view and then make your own decisions and be accountable for that as well after, and not blame it on advisors.
So how's your journey been as an investor? You've come across several advisors. In fact, our journey has involved me knowing you from your day one in Abler, given the fact that I was actually advising Abler even before you joined.
Correct.
So how has it been in terms of the journey? How has it been in terms of you seeing a lot of evolution with different advisors? But I don't want you to obviously talk about other advisors because you can't name them. So let's not talk about those aspects. But if you were to talk about us as such, which I think you can freely talk about given this is my podcast.
Yes.
But if you have to just talk about evolution of an advisor, what do you see the evolution to the role play in? What are your expectations? This is more for a lot of our viewers to understand if they have to look at the right set of advisors. That could be the banker, that could be the lawyer, that could be the chartered accountant, that could be the company secretary. There are multiple stakeholders as you build. Likewise, there's a multiple stakeholders as an investor that you need in terms of taking that foolproof call.
Yeah.
What are the aspects that you see as advisors' roles, evolving to, and what do you think matters the most to you?
I think from an advisor perspective, what we see is that how practically is the advisor, whether it is legal, tax, accounting, whatever, whichever format is it, like so how practically are they thinking about this particular point? Is it just that you're reading the section and just applying it into whatever situation we are dealing with, or are you also looking at it from a business perspective? And many times that's not the case, right? When you look at let's say any financial diligence that we get done, it's so accounting driven, this is not followed and this is why your adjustment. Why is the adjustment? I mean, why has the company not followed it? Have you tried to analyze it? Right? This company has not paid tax on this particular or not deducted TDS. Simple examples. But then they don't go ahead and understand why the company has not done what is done. And that's where I think advisors get differentiated. The one who actually tries to understand and give the rationale to us. Otherwise, we have to go and do it anyways. But it will be helpful if the advisors can add that little push, right? I mean, even with vertices for that matter, I think the beauty of working with vertices for so long is that you understand what our do's and don'ts are, what are negotiable, not negotiable. That makes it easy to work with. But the added advantage is that we are investing from a business rationale perspective and not because of a legal document that we have to get signed.
Yeah.
That's only an outcome of a business decision that we have taken. So how do you accommodate that into the documents and make sure all the parties are aligned and are on the same page is something which you do, and I think you've passed it now to the team, because I don't see you anymore on our transactions. It's always the team.
Because I have to be busy hosting people like you.
Yeah, true, and podcast it. But the team does it now. So, but I've also seen that there are a lot of advisors.
That's also my greatest strength of success, right? If you come around
Truly.
and tell me that when you don't see me enough, which is a lie, you see me whenever it matters to you. But the fact that you don't see me, to the extent necessary, because it's not necessary anymore. But the fact that the team manages and there's no gap, I think that expectation to be matched for any advisor's perspective. To match that expectation that where an advisor is used to X as an individual, because ours is person-centric, right? Our business has always been person-centric. You come from that background. And then to institutionalize it. I think the biggest win is when the person-centric essence moves to the team and the client does not feel the gap. I think that is very core.
That is true, baby. What you're saying is absolutely true. But for you as well, there is a journey in that, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely.
And your clients need to live through that journey.
You've seen it. You've lived it with me.
I have lived it, but what I'm saying is not everybody will live through that journey, right? People need quick fixes and they might just snap and switch. So that also is the reality of life.
Thankfully, we've not had that ever.
Good for you. Good for you. But that happens. And I've seen that happen, where people don't have the patience to deal with new teams or new people coming in and therefore switch.
So, if you have to address, and this is where a lot of times people try to go across and look at it in a manner at times, and I face this a lot, right, Smriti? I am known mostly in the country as the founder's go-to counsel.
Yeah.
I have exceptionally certain amount of investor clients who are literally married to me. Luckily, Abler and you guys are one of them who I've seen the journey from day one, right? There's several others also like that. But I've also had this feedback where perhaps one of the things that comes across and helps is when you have an advisor who is also resonating with the founder's mindset. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting the deal done.
Yeah.
With the must-haves and the good-to-haves, but being able to distinguish it.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's not about my comma being prettier than your comma. It's about ensuring that the deal doesn't get a full stop within the parameters.
Correct.
So, do you believe that, and again, in terms of an advice to a lot of our viewers, do you believe that from the advisor perspective, the quotient of empathy to the counterparty side is equally important? Because what you don't want is a facilitator. Any advisor is a facilitator. What you don't want is a facilitator to come in and create disruption at a level where the deal may get done, but there is this little bitter aftertaste for the marriage parties to continue, which is you and the founder in your case. So do you believe having a mindset of maybe more empathy than just theory always adds value to getting a deal closed?
Absolutely, yes. I don't think there is two thoughts about it. But I think it's also a very persona driven, I think, and not just one advisor company versus other. I mean, there are people who get the deal done in the same way, whether it's on the founder side or on the investor side. So it's not, I mean, coming back to your point on whether it's more empathy when you also represent a lot of founders may not always necessarily be true, because it then boils down to you as a persona, right? That you understand and empathize with both sides. And I've seen that with some others as well. But the larger legal fraternity goes by the book. And it's not about deal making, it's about my comma versus your comma.
True. So now we come to the second last or the penultimate segment of the podcast.
Okay.
That is the essence of a lifeboat. And how important is lifeboat in one's life? I am a strong believer, and I've told you this several times. I'm a strong believer about compartments in life. I believe, therefore, even a lifeboat has compartments. So when it comes to Smriti Chandra, the investor, the director, the inspiration, the person that a lot of women see as perhaps a role that they want to follow, shoes that they want to fill, When I break all that down to come down to that girl who started her journey from tier 2, tier 3 towns and made it till here, there would have been a journey of situations where you felt you're drowning. There will be various situations where you felt that maybe this is the time to go across and hold back, call it quits, look at something else. But every time you made it ahead, you evolved, you became stronger, and you kept winning. So in your life, what importance do you give to a lifeboat? And if I had to factor in few relevant people in your lifeboat, how and what would you talk about? Who would they be? So let's talk about the importance of a lifeboat in your life.
From a professional perspective?
Both. Professional, personal, both. This is a combination too. This conversation has not just been about professional, personal.
Yeah.
Here, people have got to know you on both sides. They've got to know you as the coconut oil-based plated girl sitting in the front bench and going and getting rank 1 to being, a rock
prejudice.
star. Yeah.
I was always a bank venture, never had coconut oil in my hair, and yet got rank 1.
It's not necessarily prejudice, it's more about perception. Okay. A geek's perception is XYZ.
Yeah.
You have broken the perception. So the idea of this podcast was to showcase that you could be both, right? You could break. So talk about everything.
It's a tough one because I guess, as you said, over the years, there have been different instances and there have been different lifeboats, I would say.
But do you believe in the concept of lifeboat? Do you think that is a very relevant aspect in every individual's life? Or is it understated and undermined?
No, it is not. No, I think it is very individual again, right? I mean, how much importance do you give and how significant it is for you? A lifeboat may be important for you, but not for somebody else, right? So it's very different. I mean, I think generalizing it to say how it's needed or not needed is making it very...
The question is not about how it's needed. The question is, do you believe in the concept? Or do you believe that, again, that concept is something which is so perspective oriented or so relative that someone may not even believe in the concept?
Yeah.
Till now, I've not heard anyone who does not believe in the concept. So you might again be the aberration here.
No, so as I said, so I'm talking about the concept. It's not necessary that you always believe that there is a lifeboat to save you, right? Or you fall back on, or whatever you kind of call it, right?
The question is whether you need one, the essence of the concept to say that you need
again,
one. Having a lifeboat is luck.
No. Again, you're taking a different... So what I'm saying is whether you need one is also a decision you make depending on what kind of individual you are, right? Mm-hmm. There are individuals who might not need one. Mm-hmm. There are individuals who might need many lifeboats.
Fair.
So that changes. Fair. And therefore the definition of whether lifeboat is important to you or not important to you, or whether it is there in your life or not there in your life, or whether you define it as a lifeboat is also very different. Having said that,
I have a different perspective, I'll come to it, but I'll tell you where I qualify. Not having a lifeboat means that you're actually relying on yourself, and you yourself are your lifeboat. So lifeboat again has a very different construct. It's not necessarily that's third party oriented.
True. And therefore the definition of lifeboat
I
is...
agree.
To each...
Very relative. That I completely
agree. Right? So that's what I meant.
I agree on that.
The importance you assign to a lifeboat and who that lifeboat is completely on you. Having said that, of course, there are always people you fall back on. And despite or irrespective of the situation, whether it's professional or personal, there is your inner circle. And without that, sustaining for a long period of time becomes tough. You might be that you are fine by yourself, and that's also okay.
True.
And to a large extent, sometimes I'm that.
Again, something I resonate very well with.
I don't think I've gotten into those
valleys,
yeah, where I needed somebody to pull me out as a lifesaver.
Polite term is valleys.
Yeah, but I don't think I've gone through that, so it's difficult for me to resonate. But have I had my dark days? Yes. Have I had bad days? Yes. True. And have I had my good days? Yes. And do I share that with an inner circle? Yes.
Yeah.
And that remains the same, whether it's good or bad. That doesn't change. So whether you call it lifeboat or whatever else, I mean, it's difficult to say. But there are a few people who would be there in that circle. And that will include, of course, some people from family.
Of course.
Some people from your friends. Some people from our professional world, and depending on what you're dealing with, you kind of give importance
It's customized.
It's customized. How much of relevance and how much of involvement you want from the other person.
True, it's need based.
Yeah, we're selfish.
It's always. We are selfish, and perhaps at times I think the most selfless thing that one can do is to be selfish.
Yeah.
A lot of people
to maintain your own sanity.
A lot of people underestimate the power of being selfish.
Yeah.
And I believe one of the most selfless things you can do to yourself is be selfish.
Absolutely true. And I feel a lot of times people do take it as an excuse that I didn't have anybody to save me. In whatever form and format, I'm just putting it bluntly, but that I got drowned because there was nobody to save me, and it's easy to blame.
I agree. In fact, the reason I kept saying this, right, and you're the only exception to this entire format of the podcast that I've created, where you're in my office as against me going to your place, is also because one of the things that always comes with you is a diverse view. And this is what I really wanted to bring out. I wanted the audience to also know the ability of the diverse view that comes in. Because while the concept and the broad base of this show is about lifeboat and that everyone needs a lifeboat, the differentiator that comes in is that you yourself can be your lifeboat. It's not necessary that it has to have a third party.
Yeah.
It's situational and circumstance oriented. So a lot of times for me, I am my own lifeboat.
Yeah.
And I have my own goddamn ring which I carry around.
No, and a lot of time it comes across quite negatively to people. People tend to think that you're just
selfish,
extremely selfish and arrogant and too self-obsessed. But that's not the case. I think people who are close to me will know that's absolutely not the case, and how much there is that I can think for others. But that's how
personality is. And,
yeah,
and
but
that's
having
why,
said that, are there people? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I need my people around me, and that's
we all need
there.
our people.
Yeah.
And we are glad that you and I are also one of each other's people whenever the time comes in.
Yeah.
That's very important. Now we come to the most fun part of the segment, okay? And
after stressing me out for so long,
my team has prepared a whole bunch of things on this. I added.
This is like a rapid fire. From
It's called live. No, don't mention anybody. Don't mention anybody. There's no inspiration around it. This is more about. It's called Lifeboat Shots. And again, it is rapid fire, but it's more fun rapid fire. I have actually added one basis something very interesting you spoke in the earlier part of our chat. So these are the ones where you don't use your brain, Smriti, which is very difficult for you.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult for you. I appreciate that, knowing the kind of person that you are.
Yeah.
But at times, you have to give your heart a chance also.
We'll try.
Yeah. So this is the ones where you have to give your heart a chance and answer from your heart. Shall we?
I will try. Yes.
Shall we?
And I can say cut, right?
Yeah, you can always say cut, but this is a podcast. Yeah, at the end of the day, life doesn't give you a retake. Why should the podcast give?
Yes.
But go ahead. Book or phone?
Now phone.
Whiskey or gin?
Gin.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Dosa or paratha?
Dosa any day.
What's your go-to comfort food? If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, let's say a situation arises and you have to eat one dish for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That will be a khara bath from MTR.
Okay. What's the most wicked thing that you have ever done?
Oh, that's a tough one. Several?
The most?
I would think.
Let's make it scandalous. What is the most wicked thing that you've done? Let's shatter that perfect image of yours, and let's say that Smriti is also human. So what's the most wicked thing that you've done?
I can't think of anything right now immediately which I can actually talk about. Yeah.
Okay, I'll switch it. What's the most adventurous thing that you've done?
Most adventurous for me would be parasailing, I would think.
That's adventurous.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could go and meet and go on a date with a celebrity, and that could be any field, knowing you will always find a very random celebrity to come in. Maybe I won't say random because people will say that, random has its own definition. But I'm saying celebrity typically is always looked at from a movie star perspective.
I know it is.
But in your case, who would it be?
Shah Rukh Khan.
Okay, so this you've not surprised me. Actually, this you surprised me. I mean, like...
Any day.
I would have expected something different, but yes, this shows you're human.
Yes.
What's your favorite movie quote?
Movie quote?
Yeah. And I want to link something to this which I have written down, which I got inspired by an earlier part of what you spoke. But first talk about this. What's your favorite movie?
I can't think of anything, sir.
क्या बात कर रहे हो? शाहरुख खान है तो कुछ ना कुछ तो आ ही जाएगा.
Of course, मतलब regular ones तो है ही.
नहीं, regular and deep होना चाहिए. What is regular?
No, I definitely.
Okay, let's tell me a regular Shahrukh Khan movie quote. Yeah. What is a
No,
regular?
बड़े बड़े देशों में is an all time.
That is.
Right?
Okay.
For me, it works in all situations, good or bad.
That is not Shahrukh Khan's quote.
Hello.
That is Kajol's quote.
It's from his movie.
It doesn't matter, but that is Kajol's quote.
So you asked for movie quote.
I can't believe I'm actually remembering whose
What
quote
are
is
you
that telling
saying?
you.
It's Shah Rukh Khan who says, "बड़े बड़े देशों में ऐसी छोटी बातें होती
Kajol
है,
says
senorita."
that. Kajol says that. Okay. If it's not, then you please cut because I don't know. I have no movie knowledge around.
But actually, I don't. I can't think of a movie line which like really.
I think what you should have said is about that. Ki, you know, which is that one? Since you said Shah Rukh Khan.
हार कर जीतने वाले को बाजीगर कहते हैं.
No, that is lame. The one that talks about the entire universe conspiring when you want something really well, manifestation.
That's too deep, baby. It's Bollywood and Shah Rukh Khan. Come on.
Okay, so you want to go out on a date, but you also call him shallow.
Not shallow.
That's hypocritical, dude.
Not shallow.
Of course, if he's not deep, then. Now, I'm linking this to something that you had said earlier because I remember you said earlier that your family was a Bollywood buff and you guys would watch every given movie over the weekend or any other. Name one movie from which you have drawn inspiration in a manner which has helped you today in your life the way it is.
You don't watch movies to draw inspiration.
I know, but at times you don't.
It is to release your brain.
At times what happens is you may unknowingly realize something and it draws tremendous amount. Like I have a movie where I can say I have drawn incredible inspiration. That's my life motto. I'll give you a hint. I'll facilitate your thought. For me, my life's motto is driven from a movie called Rocky, where there is a whole construct about that it does not matter how hard you can hit. What matters is how hard you get hit, and in spite of that, can you get up and keep moving ahead? So for me, that's life. And that's the biggest inspiration that I've drawn from that movie. So it's not necessary that you put your thinking cap out.
I think I'll disappoint you on this because I don't think I have a movie which has inspired me on life.
Because you predominantly watch Bollywood.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm a total Bollywood buff.
Then I don't blame you too much.
That's another prejudice there.
Otherwise you got inspired.
No. Why?
Why? You can't get
just
Bollywood.
Because
Bollywood is not inspirational. Are you trying to say that?
No, I'm saying that I don't watch movies to draw inspiration for my life, whether it is Hollywood or Bollywood.
It's natural. It should come naturally. You don't go and watch to draw. It's like Govinda can't go across and inspire in a Govinda movie. What he can inspire you is that no matter what the situation is, make a joke about it and be happy about it.
Yourself.
So you draw.
Well, I'm not that.
I understand. That's not a prejudice. But anyway, what's that one indulgence you would love to partake in but no one knows about? Not your family members, not your inner circle, not your girl gang.
Why will you know about it, or why will the podcast know about it?
Because that's the idea of the podcast. Talk about things which people don't know about Smriti. That's the whole idea. That's what I told you as the brief at the very beginning of the podcast. At the end, you can't say, "Arey yaar, matlab, you heard the whole Ramayana and then you're like, Sita kaun thi?" It doesn't work like that.
No, that's true, but...
Talk about an indulgence, which no one knows about. Could be anything. It doesn't be that wicked that you don't talk about.
No, but that's the thing. I think somebody or other will know if I'm indulging in something. I don't think there's anything which anybody doesn't know. You know what I mean?
No, I'm talking about that you would want to partake. You still not partake in it. So they would have known had you partake in it.
Oh. Like that?
Like that.
Indulgence.
Dude, this is rapid fire.
Yeah, it's not happening, clearly.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything, very honestly.
You're very boring.
Let's
go to the last question for the day. This I'm sure you'll answer. If you could have had one superpower for a day, what would it be and why?
One superpower for the day.
Don't think.
It's not coming that naturally for me.
Think. you ruined this entire rapid fire zone. But think, one superpower, what would you want?
I would want the superpower to travel the world. See every part of the world.
In one day?
Yeah, if possible.
Okay. Like teleportation in a way.
Whichever way. All the one...
In one day you will see everything.
If I had the superpower, you're saying it. Right?
Yeah,
It's
I mean, like
the-
even superpowers have their limitation. I mean, like
now you can't put caveats there.
एक
No.
दिन में तू सारा दुनिया देख लेगी और समेट लेगी, उसमें से क्या है?
Pata nahi, I'm just saying, if
Alright.
that is the power, superpower you want me to
I don't want you. It was your thought.
think of. No, think
Oh,
of.
fair enough.
It would be because I think travel for me is
I know.
quite...
You ensure that I feel jealous with your IG updates and your pictures that you have.
That I don't know about, but yeah. So
Yeah, it's okay. You have a good
different
life.
countries, different
Don't
people.
rub it in. I understand you have a good life. It's okay. So, before we end, there's one last formality that you have to do. And I keep joking about this, but actually I'm quite dead serious. So, the formality is that I'm using this as my retirement units. So, I have a whole bunch of super achievers like you all. And I'm hoping one day that because of the billions of dollars that you all will earn and become such big people, your signatures will be worth a lot. And that day I can auction all the Lifeboat mugs with your signatures, because these will all become collector's items.
Yeah.
And make a whole lot of money out of it. But jokes apart, the idea is that please write some message. This goes into our Lifeboat cupboard. It's a memory. It's a memento which stays for season 1, and this is something which is very valuable for us as a whole team. So please write something that you felt about this, what you think about this, and what you believe that this podcast can keep doing. Hopefully season after season.
Too much to think again.
I know, but think and write, dude. You have to do it. दोस्ती का कुछ तो वो होता है ना यार, किया है तो निभाना पड़ेगा. See, I even opened the cap for you. Can't be sweeter than that. What?
Huh?
Right? I'm waiting. What will you write and think?
I don't know. This is too short a notice to think and write.
I mean, like, that's the idea. The idea is in this think and write. In the rapid fire, you are not supposed to think and answer. What have you written? Can you show it to me also? She's written a whole bunch of stuff.
What? I can just sign.
Yeah, of course. No. Love
You only asked
Can
me
you
to
give
write.
it to me now?
No.
I have to show it to
If
you.
you're going to make fun of this.
Yeah, that's really nice, yeah? Beautiful. I made you reflect, is it? Oh my God. Thanks. So that's what it is, folks. That was Smriti Chandra. Thank you so much for watching this episode. See you in the next one. Signing off. Hi, this is Vinayak Burman. I hope आपको उतना ही मजा आया इस एपिसोड को देखने के लिए जितना मुझे आया इसको बनाने में. And if you think this adds value to your life, if you think this will teach you something, if you think this will help you to learn and create something in your lives, then go across and like, subscribe, share and comment. It will mean the whole world to me and my friends. If you don't have time to watch the entire podcast, then do subscribe to Vinayak Burman Clips and Vinayak Burman Shots, where we take out the most relevant extracts, the most important extracts of those podcasts, of those stories, of those moments for you and for your benefit, so that you can try and understand the gist of the whole conversation and yet take a lot of learning home. Till we see you next time, signing off, Vinayak Burman.